Now make a statement as a representative of the Russian Federation. We thank the SRSG, Caroline Ziade, for the briefing on the situation in Kosovo and for the thoughts that she shared. We welcome the participation in this meeting of the first Deputy Prime Minister of Serbia, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ivica Dačić, and we've heard the opinion of Ms. Danica Grvala-Schwartz, who dedicated most of her statement on the links and bilateral relations between Russia and Serbia, and that is not Prishtina's affair. Instead of legitimate claims of Pristina. And also, I already mentioned this during the previous session, but today Ms. Grvala-Schwartz once again attempted to pass off the Russian foreign minister and Serbian foreign minister's plan for interagency consultations as Serbia giving up its sovereignty and passing off the adoption of its foreign policy to Russia, and that is absolute falsehood, not professional. Russia's position on Kosovo remains unchanged. We favor Belgrade and Pristina achieving a lasting, mutually acceptable international legal solution based on SC Resolution 1244. The solution must be in the interest of Belgrade and the Serbian people, and it must be endorsed by the Security Council. The situation in Kosovo is increasingly alarming. Over the past few months, the situation in the province has repeatedly been pushed to the brink of renewed outright conflict. Pristina, with the support of Western capitals, continues to try to take control of Serb-populated areas. It seems that despite the fixation of the international community on human rights, when it comes to the Serbs, almost no one seems to care about those rights. There's a continued systematic policy for physically expelling these Serbs and turning the province into an ethnically pure Albanian space, as mentioned today by Mr. Dačić. And I would add that out of the 372,000 non-Albanians living in the area by June 1999, 209,000 have been forced to leave. And there are regular incursions in the north of the province by the special forces of the Kosovar police. They are building security force strongholds on land that has been confiscated by force from non-Albanian locals. Under trumped-up pretexts, former Serbian law enforcement agents of Kosovo are being put on trial. And Orthodox holy sites and cemeteries are being desecrated. There are increasingly frequent physical attacks against Serbs and their property. Since Albin Kurti came to power in February 2020, in Kosovo there have been more than 300 acts of violence documented against Serbs. And the criminals, as usual, are not being prosecuted. Colleagues, this is the reality on the ground, but we all understand that without a negotiation process, without achieving an agreement and creating the relevant mechanisms for protecting the Serbs living in the north, as well as the few that remain to the south of the Ibar River, it would not be possible to resolve existing problems. And here we must look back at recent history. Today, Ms. Ziada already talked about the anniversary date. So April 19th marks the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Brussels Agreement of 2013. And the main provision of this agreement was the creation of an association of Serb municipalities in Kosovo. But throughout the time that has passed since, the Kosovan authorities have been refusing to implement that with impunity. And there are remaining substantive problems because Pristina, and we must be blunt about this, is simply not interested in normalizing relations nor in honoring its obligations. And that is why Albin Kurti insists unreasonably that the Association of Serb Municipalities must comply with the Kosovan constitution. It must be multi-ethnic, but without any executive powers. That means throughout this time, the Kosovo Albanians are trying to replace what was agreed upon with something that's like an NGO, essentially. And this trajectory must be rejected. Only a full-fledged community would allow for the basic rights and security of the Serbs of the area to be upheld. And this would be the key to the region's socioeconomic development and cultural identity. Lastly, it also is a prerequisite for achieving real and not ephemeral progress toward settlement. It is recognition of the true goals of Cortes policies that we believe we should approach the verbal agreement reached between Belgrade and Pristina and Ohrid on March 18th on two documents, the agreement on path for normalization and the annex on implementation. We believe that the optimism expressed in the UNMIK report regarding prospects for its implementation are seriously overinflated. We remind you that Belgrade, as evinced by many very clear statements by the Serbian leadership, has agreed to continue dialogue with Pristina based on these ideas, but only if their red lines are respected, and that is to say, non-agreement with the unilaterally proclaimed independence and Kosovo's membership in the UN, as well as the rapid creation of the Association of Serb Municipalities in Kosovo in accordance with the Brussels agreements. Once again, Pristina has decided to escalate tensions on April 23rd when it held the so-called municipal elections in the north part of Kosovo, despite the refusal of most of the Serbian majority to put forward its candidates. This vote still took place under pressure from the US and EU. As you know, the Serbs unanimously rejected and boycotted this insult to the democratic procedure. Despite the meager turnout of 3.5% and the lack of basic conditions for a vote, this did not prevent Pristina from calling these illegitimate elections to be successful, and they anointed the victors, 4 Kosovo Albanians representing a negligible share of the population, 96.5% of which did not even pay attention to this farce. We're talking about a provocative replacement of normal election processes by a cheap substitute, which was approved by the Western sponsors of Pristina. The US and EU are encouraging the de facto usurpation of authority by the Kosovan authorities in the north of the province, and they're trying to silence the voices of Serbs in the face of this campaign of terror against them. And thus the West continues to add fuel to the fire of the conflict between Belgrade and Pristina and are constantly pressuring the Serbs from all directions. For example, at the very height of the conflict in December 2022, the Czech presidency of the European Council accepted the Kosovan application for EU candidate status. On April 18th, the European Parliament passed a visa liberalization regime for citizens of Kosovo, which should enter into effect no later than January 1st, 2024. And this is also true of the spontaneous examination of membership of Kosovo in the Council of Europe, which took place on April 24th. The way this was organized and the votes in favor of certain countries eloquently demonstrate their true attitude toward the UN and the Security Council resolutions, in this case 1244, which is the basis for Kosovan settlement. UNMIK also is under pressure by the Kosovo Albanians, which our Western colleagues would never have allowed to happen for other peacekeeping operations. We believe that UNMIK ought to carry out its functions to the full and needs for this adequate human and financial resources. We call for accelerating investigation of the May 2019 arrest of an officer of UNMIK, Mr. Krasnishokov, by the Kosovo Albanian police and the severe injuries that he suffered. We must once and for all put an end to recurrence of Pristina's ill treatment of the mission's personnel, as was the case with Russian citizen Antonov, who in December 2021, through an illegal decision of the Kosovan authorities, was declared persona non grata. It's clear that the main goal of the West is to use any means possible to subjugate the Balkans and bring the countries of this region into its military and political bloc. Under these circumstances, the statements of the Quint about stabilizing the region strain all credulity. If this were in their interest, they would have no compunctions about setting the whole region ablaze. This is seen through the increasing activity of NATO. In violation of Resolution 1244, its members are facilitating the gradual formation of a quasi-Kosovo army and increasing supplies of weapons and military equipment. Washington essentially has privatized the Bunsteel military base, which was established for purely peacekeeping purposes. And this is being done shamelessly, as if everyone had forgotten about the staged so-called massacre in Rachak, which was set up to justify the invasion of NATO in Yugoslavia, which led to mass bombing of the country with depleted uranium, mass civilian casualties, and destruction of civilian infrastructure. catastrophic damage was done to the environment, as can be seen through the report on the impact of the Yugoslavian war on the environment in Southeast Europe, adopted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in January 2001. The issue is that NATO has never really cared about this collateral damage, as it was called by former Secretary of State of the U.S. Albright. And they don't care anymore today, as seen by the fact that the UK is providing the Kiev regime with depleted uranium weapons. Colleagues, in light of these events of 1999, I would like to point out the proceedings against one of the heads of the Kosovo Liberation Army, Hashim Tachi, and his accomplices. The proceedings has begun in The Hague in April. We view this as the last chance for restoring justice, albeit 25 years after the inhuman atrocities that were committed. We hope that these criminals will be punished as they deserve, and the Hague court will not repeat the disastrous mistakes of the International Tribunal on the former Yugoslavia. I now return to my functions as President